Okay, so finally, finally we are going to be getting on to the finishing things of the Saab. Welcome back to the shop. We've got so much to cover. I'm going to try to keep this as concise as possible, mostly because I've covered a lot of this stuff on the channel before, but I think it is worth doing a recap on some of it. So let me turn you around and show you what we're up against today. The Saab has been filled. Okay, so we've covered in the past what we do to fill the weave, and it's water-based polyurethane and microballoons. Mix it up like it's a frothy toothpaste, and then you simply apply it with a brush and sand it back until it's flat. We've got some really nice imperfections that will be looking like little dents and waves in the panels, which will be fantastic and give it a really nice amount of depth and perspective, because if it looks too perfect, in my opinion, it no longer looks like an airplane. It just looks like something that came out of a factory. That's just my personal opinion. That's how I choose to model. I see depth. I see imperfections as depth and character. So don't be afraid to not seek after that perfectly smooth, glossy finish, because it's just not practical. You go to any of these fly-ins with real warbirds, like they're even jets, the panels are not perfectly smooth. There's some wrinkle to it. Now, that may be an exception with some of the more modern fighters that are more precise, like the stealth ones, and certainly things that are going like crazy Mach. But for these types of builds, it's okay. It's okay to let things be a little bit imperfect and wavy, and I like that. So, moving on. Now you'll notice that the fuselage is here, but where's everything else? So everything has been sanded down, so the booth is prepped and ready. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there on the floor ready for paint. We're going to start with the bottom blue because I prefer to work light paint to dark. Reason being is that it's easier to do the overlap. So we're going to be doing an overlap of the seam right along this line, right? So if we're going to be overlapping, it's easier to overlap with a dark color than it is to overlap with a light color. All right. So at this point, what we're going to be doing is focusing on panel lines. Now, panel lines look like this. The wings have already been prepped with panel lines. Now, how do we do this? The easy answer to that question is it's complicated. Chart pack tape is one of those little secrets in the hobby that some people just seem to hang on to. It's not that big of a deal. This stuff, it's a little vinyl roll of tape, and it's 1/32nd, yeah, 1/32nd width. And you just tape it wherever there's a panel line. It seems tedious. It's not. It takes a lot less time than you think. So don't be afraid to take the time and do it, because this is absolutely worth it. Apply the chart pack tape wherever there's a panel line, okay? And I would suggest smoothing it down, not just with your finger, but take something like a bamboo skewer or a round piece of balsa or something like this. So there's an adhesive on the back of it, right? And it's got to stick. Make sure your surface is as dust-free as you can. Brush it off, wipe it down. I'm not saying you need to go as far as using like rubbing alcohol or anything like that. You just need to make it pretty darn clean, and then stick it down so that it stays there, right? Then after that, all right, so over here, your best friend is primer, okay? You can use a high build automotive primer. I've done it before, but really any primer will do. Part of the reason why we're sealing the weave of the fabric is so that we can use something like this, right? So the acetone propellant is not going to melt the foam that's behind it. So with this armed, all right, and shaken up, we are going to apply 3 light layers, okay? You're not trying to fog it out, and if you're getting runs, way too much. So ease off, back off, Let it cure out. If you get a run, that's fine, because with primer, you can sand it back. So any of those runs, take the time and sand those off. If you have a little bit of the chart pack tape come off, that's okay too. You can smush your finger down into the paint, right? And help it stick there, because you're doing multiple layers. Usually that's only going to happen on the first layer. So that being said, you just go back and you do additional layers and make sure that it sticks. Now this primer, most primers will dry pretty quick to the touch in like 15-20 minutes. So then after that, you're going to go through the whole model, and anywhere there's a panel line, after you've done the 3 coats along each line, you're not going to try to fog out and prime the whole plane. That's not the point. You're trying to build up a little lip of paint. So looking at the wing, you can see I didn't prime the whole thing. I mostly just focused on the lines and where they were. Then you're going to take your sanding pad again, and you're going to sand back the paint, the primer, right? You're going to sand it back until you see this black material again, and then you're going to start peeling it up slowly. So that's the overview. So I'm going to put you guys on a tripod, do a little bit of time-lapse work here, so that you can see me just putting on the chart pack tape. I'm using some reference drawings that I've got from the plans. You can use sometimes, printouts, 3-view printouts, those help too. I've done that before. I used a lot of measurements and printouts and such for the aluminum panels on the P47, but there's not a whole lot of panel lines on this model because most of it was sheeted with lumber. So it's kind of crazy in that way. Cool. So let's get into it, and I'm going to stop yakking and working. We've got panel lines. How cool is that? Now, a couple of things I want to point out. It is important to know that the lines that we created for our hatch were intentionally placed because they look like panel lines, right? All right, so that is something important to note because that comes ahead of time. That comes with a lot of planning. And given that that was not specified in the plans, I finally get to tell you why I made the hatch where I made it. Okay. It seems like a silly thing, but I planned that a long time ago, a long time ago. And being able to finally talk to you about it is kind of exciting for me. Okay, so moving on. The one thing that I feel like I absolutely need to tell you about, and if I don't do it, it's going to be a disservice. Where is it? All right, so chart pack tape. Do not, I repeat, do not get anything but the brand chart pack. All right? Let me explain. A certain guy thought he'd save $2 or $3 per pack of chart tape. Just by buying a non-chart pack brand. Don't do it. The adhesive is different and the vinyl is of lesser quality. So when you go to pull the vinyl off, the adhesive will leave a residue that's kind of gummy, and then on top of that, the vinyl is more brittle and it will just chunk off, and you will be picking at it with tweezers or a needle for hours. Okay, it is worth the money. It's only like $6-7 for a roll. Seems crazy expensive, but everything is these days for something so simple. But honestly, you're doing yourself a favor in terms of time, aggravation, headache. Just spend the money for the name brand stuff. 100% worth it. So at this point, the only thing left to do is to shoot some primer. So I'm going to do that off camera and we'll come back.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
Welcome back. It's been, I don't know, about 2 hours, hour or so. Yeah, went and changed the brake pads on my SUV. So good side project while the paint cures out. Let me turn you around. So this is what you're left with. It doesn't look like much, but essentially you've just got these lines that still, they still look like tape that's on there. But we're going to take care of that. I'm going to put you on the tripod and I'm going to sand this so that you can see what I'm talking about in terms of sanding it back. And then I'll bring you back for the reveal when I pull some of this stuff off. I'm not going to torture you with doing the whole thing. It looks like this when it's done. That's what we're looking for, just a little bit of texture. And that's it. Let's get sanding. All right, so I've just sanded back until I can see black again, right? And so I'm taking a wood piece because it gives a little bit. I'm trying not to scratch the paint surface, right? So just pull it up a little bit and then lift. And that's it. You're left with a very subtle panel line. Sorry, bumped you. You get this one that you can't see. All right, so here we go. So this is what I'm talking about. If you get the cheap stuff, this stuff, the residue from the adhesive on it will stick in this groove, and the vinyl will be all brittle and it'll just chip up and you'll be picking at this. And it's a pain. Whereas this, you just peel it back and it comes right off and you're left with a very nice, subtle panel line that will look fantastic. And just to show you on the foam surface, does exactly the same thing. Pretty cool. And so then you have all of this leftover stuff that is going in the garbage. So it's hard to imagine that this is disposable, but it is. It's served its purpose. It's done its work, and we no longer need it. Now, the astute observer will say, but Josh, you just painted the canopy. You've got paint all over the canopy. It's clear. How are you going to get that off? I didn't. Well, I mean, I did, but what you're seeing here is something called liquid masking film. See how it's opaque and kind of smeary? So this stuff is super cool, and you can buy it in this huge jug and it'll last you the whole rest of your life, and you can use it around the house too. But you literally paint it on kind of like a rubber cement, and I do 3 layers by brush. In fact, I use this brush right here, that one. And I just paint it on. I just paint it on. What's nice is it goes over these compound surfaces, and I can spray to my heart's desire, and I don't care. The also really cool thing is once I'm done applying all the color to the fuselage, I can go in and draw lines for all of my canopy framing. And then I can remove the canopy framing and then mask off everything else and spray down the whole canopy. And then once that's done, I can pull out all the window pieces and we'll be done. It's really, really nice to use this liquid masking film. It's, I mean, some people use it in a airbrush. I find that it just gets clogged up. So I do the paint method. It works just as well, and I like it nice and thick so it's easier to lift. It peels off like a layer of like Jello on the surface. It's really weird. Play with it. Play with it. It's really cool. sometimes we have to get to the end of the video to get some of these tips and tricks. And that's why I left it in here, because it didn't make sense to talk about it elsewhere, at least in my workflow. So that's part of paint prep. You've got to do your panel lines and sand everything down, make sure it's all nice and smooth, make sure all the weave is filled so that you can do all the paint and everything looks nice. So yeah, we are on the home stretch here. The wings are ready, all the ancillary parts like the geared doors and flaps and ailerons and stuff, it's all ready to paint. So I'm going to try to shut up now, and I'm going to get this work of art in the paint booth. And hopefully the next time you see me with this airplane, it'll be an even more beautiful flying work of art.